Guys, we are here for another episode of From Field to Future. I'm here with my good friend Dan. It has a YouTube channel, has guested on a few other podcasts that I've heard. I know he's been on the Rich Outdoors. Dan is a CrossFit or crazy gym fanatic. He is in killer shape. He loves to chase big elk and big bears. And I aspire to be like him. A little obsessive, yes. And I have never been called by Dan for a pack out because he knows it would probably kill me. But I hear if you get a call from Dan for a pack out, you better be ready to eat. So
We've had some brutal ones for sure.
We've got a lot of mutual friends, and they've given Dan his one, and they're waiting to cash in that check.
Yeah,
So.
there's a couple of guys that I definitely owe a lot of pack outs to, many miles, and I'm kind of thankful that none of them have cashed that check yet, because I'm not sure I could pay them all back at least in one season. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we are here to talk about taking kids hunting, but we can't not talk about spring bear because spring bear opens tomorrow. And we have a weird year this year because it's super warm. I'm looking out my patio at green wheat field.
Yeah.
Are you ready to rock and roll? Do you have some bears spotted and stuff? Or
I am not ready. I
Okay.
can't believe that the opening season starts tomorrow. I'm getting ready. I'm hoping to get out, not next weekend, but the weekend after. Try to get out for like a 3-day trip. But yeah, I mean, this weather we've had this year is crazy. And I'm really curious what the mountains are going to look like in some of the spots that I go into. I'm kind of worried.
Yeah. So I do a lot of work up in Big Sky in the Yellowstone Club. They had bears on job sites last week. It is green or starting to green up there. There's a little bit of snow on the groomed ski trails and stuff like that. Now they're calling for 10 to 15 tomorrow, which is kind of scary. And I mean, there's always a good spring dump. Yeah. Luckily, I haven't seen any elk calves run around or anything like that. So hopefully if we do get a big dump, it's not going to take and wipe out our brand new deer and elk populations. But we'll see how it goes. I, like you, I'm going up to the northeastern part of the state next weekend. Not this weekend, but next weekend with a buddy of mine. And basically, it's not going to be anything crazy. We're both taking our boys. It'll be a lot of road hunting, a few hikes.
There you go.
We'll throw a shotgun in case we see a turkey. Maybe we'll get some rabbits and we'll have a little rabbit fry or something like that. But yeah, this year's just been weird. And I think, I haven't got onto the snowtail reports or any of that stuff, but it feels like I should be checking or going out to my spots I go in end of May, not beginning of April.
I'm thinking about a couple of spots that I hit early season, and I'm like, I don't even know, it might be prime right now in those areas with as little snowpack that we've had this year. And like I said, even if we get a big dump right now, it'll be gone in a week or two and it'll just explode the grass.
And that's the thing is, I was driving down the canyon today on the way back home, and it's green grass up there, up on the hilltops. It might be a early year and get them quick. And then have you checked out any of the new bear regulations this year? We've got a dry area in Montana now.
In fact, I opened up a couple of emails. Was it yesterday and today? We got a couple of emails from the FWP about hound stuff. I haven't looked at any of the regs real specifically because a lot of the areas I hunt are just general areas. I agree. I think it's going to be an early year. I don't know about you and last year, but last year, man, it was kind of the same thing. I feel like our snowpack, we had more snowpack last year, but things greened up pretty quick. Some of the areas that I hit were too green, and you couldn't find bears because they could be anywhere kind of. Then other areas that I hit where there was no grass. And it's like, what the heck's going on? There's no grass here and there's tons of grass out there, So I don't know, man. Last year was a tough year. I will have a bear hunting video coming out on my channel here. My goal was to have it out by tomorrow. Unfortunately, I had some computing issues.
And you're recording a podcast
And I'm
tonight,
recording a podcast. Hopefully the parts to fix my computer will be in on Thursday, and I'm going to get it pushed out by this weekend. That's
perfect. Well, when this launches, we'll be sure to put a link in the show notes. I'm excited. Did you put out a bear video last year, or was that 2 years ago?
Trying to think if I did I don't think I did put out a bear video last year.
Okay.
Didn't kill a bear last year, or no, year before last. No, I don't think I did put out a bear video.
Okay.
We did 23, I think was the last bear video.
Yeah, you had one with one of your friends that you'd hunted
Oh wait,
with.
yeah, that was year before last.
Okay,
So that
yeah,
was last
yeah.
year's video.
So
Well, 24 video. The 25 video will be coming out this coming weekend, and then 23 was out. So we did have a bear video. Yep, Trent
So-
from Minnesota got his.
yeah, that's right. Be sure to link that in the show notes too if you want to see some extreme mountain
was a
bear
fun
hunting.
trip.
Yeah,
That
it
was a
looked
really
like it
good
was a
fun
great time. Now, are you still? Is it a big jet black that you're holding out for? Is
Yes,
is that what's on the hit list?
Dude, I am cursed
Yeah.
so bad. And
Right.
and I'm not going to spoil this year's episode, but it's going to be worth watching.
Okay,
I found
okay.
an absolute giant bear last year. And yeah, I'm still holding out for a jet black. Maybe I'm knocking on wood. This is going to be the year.
Right. I know for the last 4 or 5 years, it's like
Yeah.
every year spring bear season, it's like if you want to see some giant cinnamon and chocolate bear, just follow down on Instagram and you're going to see some awesome big bears.
Dude.
Now, the jet blacks, and he, at least in the years past, he was willing to trade for a jet black.
Yes.
He'd trade some waypoints or something.
Yes.
There. I don't know if I know this year I'm not in good enough shape to make that trade, if I find something. But,
Hey, it doesn't have to be
you
far.
know,
Like you
but-
find one next to the road, I'll take it.
Right. Well, yeah, but the one you
Yeah,
were going to
yeah,
tell
yeah.
me is going to be
Right.
14 miles back
dude,
in.
man,
or
there
something.
was that year that Trent killed his bear, man. There was a chocolate back there that I'd seen the year before and passed on, and that was a solid 12 miles deep.
Those adventures are awesome. Last spring, I didn't bear hunt at all because I was building a house. Last fall, I only got out maybe a half a dozen times.
Yeah.
And, the year before, I was in ripping shape. I ran the half marathon. Well, I jogged the half marathon in Missoula.
But
like,
still.
I took and went out that fall, and I was walking my buddies in the ground. I was 100% hardcore, eating carnivore. I was super great and disciplined with my diet and stuff like that. And then building a house and working a day job and working 80 hours a week or 100 hours a week. I stop at the truck stop and grab a soda and candy bars, and now that habit is still with me, unfortunately. And I'm hoping we get some draw results this week.
The draw results are gonna come soon.
Maybe tomorrow. I've got 16 bonus points plus 1, so I'm hoping elk.
for elk.
Yeah. So I'm hoping for a good rifle tag.
Yeah.
And if I draw that, that's going to push motivation hardcore.
Yeah.
Immediately,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
I'll
Well-
go out and try and run 3 miles that night.
Just as a
Celebrate.
celebratory.
It'll last 500 yards, and I'll be dragging my teeth on the ground there.
Well, that's
So-
90% of my motivation to stay in shape and stay fit is just my desire to be out in the woods and not
Yeah.
be exacerbated when I see something I want to go after. That's
Yeah.
definitely part of my obsession. I don't want to have that be a limiting factor. And then there's work life and everything else. But yeah, it's exciting. Hopefully we put in for some special draws this year. Montana actually cut some of the tags in the units that we hunt. Our chances are going down. We don't have any bonus points this year because we spent them all last year. Fingers crossed, maybe we'll get something. Hopefully you'll draw a cool tag and we
Right.
can tag along and
Yeah,
collaborate and do
yeah.
some video and deer hunt on
Yeah,
film.
for
That'd be
sure,
pretty cool.
for sure. So, yeah, definitely, I'll keep you posted for sure. Now, tell me your story, Dan. You and I met a few years ago shooting some long range matches and stuff like that. But how did you get into hunting? Did you grow up hunting? What's your story?
That's a great question.
Let us get to know you a little bit.
So the long and short of it is I grew up in Wyoming, son of a ranching family. My dad was an outfitter back in the 70s before I was born. After I came into the picture, hunting was still a part of the family life. My dad wasn't an outfitter at that point, but we had a pretty good sized ranch. We had a lot of people that would come out and hunt on our property, kind of as like a trespass fee thing. We had a lot of different cabins on the property, and so people would come out for rifle hunts. And then, back in the early 80s, the hunting back then was driving around in the ranch truck, and if you saw something that you wanted to shoot, you'd shoot it. I grew up, hunting was kind of a really great and exciting pastime for the family to get together, and our extended friends, my dad's ranching friends and people within the community would come out and stay with us and hunt with us on our ranch. There were a lot of elk drives. I mean, from my earliest memories would be sitting in a truck, and a lot of guys would be out driving the timber and trying to push elk out to people just sitting in strategic locations around a canyon or something like that. And so that's kind of how I got introduced to hunting. As a young kid, you're forced into being the driving crew.
Right.
of the
Yep.
ones that go
Yep.
out and kind of push the woods.
Yep.
I spent a lot of time hiking through timber, yelling at elk and pushing elk out of timber at a very early age, and just fell in love with it. There's parts of that style of hunting that I didn't necessarily fall in love with. Specifically, like party hunting was a thing back then. And I was really pretty turned off by that as I got older and kind of in my teenage years. Probably around early 90s, I would say. We had this group of guys that came out from Minnesota every year, and they were bow hunters. And they rented a cabin from us, and they would go out bow hunting. And when that was happening, my family, we were building a bed and breakfast, kind of like an Airbnb of a large scale, if you will.
Sure.
We took people on horseback adventures and four-wheeler adventures and fly fishing trips and all that kind of stuff. And the hunting, we would just let people stay, and they would go hunt and pay the trespass fee to hunt on our property. Well, I just really got interested in these guys shooting bows. I mean, it was just kind of fascinating. And one of the guys that came out owned a bow shop, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I would go out, and we would actually, they were from Wisconsin, and so they were very familiar with like timber drives too. So a lot of times we would go out and push patches of timber for deer for them, and got connected and just kind of started shadowing some of those guys. And one year they brought me out my very first bow.
Oh, nice.
And after that, dude, I was addicted. like learning to bow hunt and the art of bow hunting and spot and stock. That was something completely foreign to everyone in my family. Like nobody spot and stock hunted. And that was just so appealing to me. So that was just kind of how I got started. And then went off to college and left the ranch, if you will. My family sold the ranch the year I graduated college. And so from that point on, just kind of became a public land, push it hard, backcountry bow hunter. I stumbled across, I think it was a book from Cam Haynes, maybe early freshman year of college. And I was like, this backcountry hunting thing, I want to get into that. His book really motivated me to just start exploring the backcountry and getting away from crowds and just pushing the limit of being out in the outdoors. And yeah, I'm addicted, 100%.
So what year would that have been that you were like a freshman in college, roughly?
So that would have been 90. Gosh, man, you're outdating me. Well, no, that would have been 2000.
Okay.
Right at 2000.
Okay.
Because I graduated in 99, so 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
And, in that same time, like I said, I'd fallen in love with archery. One of my older brothers and I started shooting archery tournaments, 3D tournaments, actually, when I was in high school. And I stepped into the archery shop down in Laramie, Wyoming, where I went to school, and ended up becoming a staff shooter for those guys just because of my love and passion for shooting bows, and competed all over the United States at different 3D tournaments for many years, actually, until I moved into Montana. And that's kind of later transitioned into the long range stuff where I'm at.
So do you still bow hunt quite a bit, or
I would say
you rifle hunt quite a bit still?
Yeah, I would say 90% of my hunting, well, maybe not, 75 to 80% of my hunting is archery.
Okay.
That's where my heart and passion is. When it comes to bears, I don't know. It's like we talked about, I've got to find my giant black. I've got to find the Godzilla black bear. And I know for a fact that if I take a bow, I will find that bear and he will be untouchable with a bow. I just won't be able to make it happen, and I'll be so mad that I'll be like, why didn't I bring my rifle? So when I get that bear of my dreams with my rifle, I'll probably switch to a bow.
Okay.
And just be exclusive bow hunting for bears at that point.
I'm super conflicted because I grew up real similar to you, except for my family had a farm up in north central Montana, and we're deer hunters. Yeah. We're about the same age, so I'm well familiar with buck and brush for drives for whitetail and deer. And my dad took me hunting from a young age, but he's not an elk hunter. We moved to the Gallatin Valley in 87. I was 7 years old at the time, and he went and hunted elk. And he shot some cows and shot one, maybe two bulls in his lifetime, but really didn't. And back then in 92 or the early 90s, you didn't have a lot to go off of to learn how to become an elk hunter. And especially in these parts of the woods, the guys who had it figured out didn't tell anybody. They kept their mouths shut pretty good. I got lucky and grew up. I've shot a lot of cow elk and stuff like that, but then I've got obsessed with killing bulls, and I still haven't killed a big bull, but It took me till I was like 35 years old. 2015, I shot my first bull elk, And for a lot of years, it was like, man, what do I have to do? And I tried to buy the nicest equipment and gear and everything else, and kind of taught myself to bow hunt to extend my season, really. And then got into bugling bulls, and then it's like, why would I want to hunt anything else, you know? But it still took me till last year to shoot my first elk with a bow. I had opportunities years ago to shoot cows and stuff, but then I was like, man, I'm not going to ever shoot a bull if I shoot cows all the time. And I like shooting cows because I like eating.
They taste good.
But yeah, it's kind of been a unique journey. Now, lately, like a couple of years ago, I was obsessed. And I still am obsessed with bow hunting, but it's conflicted, right? Because I feel like if I bow hunt all the time, I have a higher level of senses, It really became apparent, like hunting antelope, something that I feel like I'm good at. And I've killed a lot of decent goats over the years and grew up hunting antelope with my dad, and just being able to see something and then figure out how to get in range was always awesome because, as opposed to elk hunting where when I grew up elk hunting, I was walking patches of timber, and now I've learned that, hey, I can do the same thing by finding a glassing knob and see elk and figure it out. But that's only been really a development in my hunting career over the last 5 or 6 years, But when I was hunting antelope, it's like, man, I can get into 150 yards of an antelope without even thinking twice. But getting to 50 yards to take or 40 yards, 30 yards to shoot that thing, I've got to be switched on, and I've never had the back of my neck hurt so bad from like crawling and trying to look over sagebrush and crawling downhill and looking uphill and stuff. And so a few years ago, I swore that, I'm going to take and quit hunting with a rifle. But I also, like I mentioned, I've got all these bonus points for Montana elk that and it's like the archery only opportunities, like it would kind of be a waste of bonus points. There's one district, but it's largely private, and really to take in all my research on hunting that, people are like, you should buy access, and I have a hard time doing that. It's expensive.
It's not a cheap game.
And I just grew up hunting in Montana, and I'm a public land hunter by attrition, not by choice. I mean, it's like, man, if I could take it when I was a kid, we'd go out and we'd knock on ranchers' doors, and you can come hunt and stuff, and that has pretty much become non-existent. There's still some parts in Montana, but really the reason I get that access is because of relationships and relatives, and even some of those. One of my uncles, he's got his ranch in land trust, and he's got a huge ranch in eastern Montana, and I can't blame him for doing it. It's like, man, the amount of money you make from guys from Minnesota that want to come out and shoot deer and for a lot of these operations, it's becoming a huge revenue stream instead of just a convenience now, which is kind of tough because then I look at my kids and they're 5 and 7, and I have found some recipes for success, which is get up early in the morning, start hiking 2 hours before dark, hike downhill so you can pack uphill, and don't hike on trails. And that's about all the secrets you'll get out of me, but that's enough, And but how? So you've got at least one son that hunts, right? And how old is he?
He's going to have a birthday. He's going to be 17 in a month.
Okay. And you've been hunting with him since he could. Could he hunt on the apprentice program when he was 10 here? Okay, so you've been, let's say, hunting with him since he was 10. So how do you hunt as hard as you do, take him out, help him find success, and not burn him out? Because it's like I take my kids for hikes, and I've got goats to pack the weight, but they're still at 5 and 7 only good for 2 miles one way, and then a good rest. And even some days they're crying, and I'm telling them, you're at Chivillichak, life sucks, suck it up and get used to it now, and try to build that mental toughness, but not ruin them on hunting. But also, like, how do we find success? You and I were lucky that we could have these deer drives or this private land hunting when we were kids, and we could get the addiction. But how do we get the kids today to take and say, I want to go hunt instead of go play video games or something like that? And I feel like part of that's finding success. If they can find success and know that they can kill something, they're going to want to go. But how do you do that? What have you found with your son to make that happen?
Yeah, really complex question that doesn't have a simple answer. I will say first and foremost, it is a struggle and it's not easy. And I think understanding that you really have to have also a clear expectation of what your end goal is. Is your end goal to go and just provide an experience for your kids that they will enjoy and remember and want to participate in? That should be our end goal, right? It shouldn't be about the size of the rack, the trophy on the wall, any of those things. But as a very experienced and accomplished hunter, I also, like, I have those goals for myself.
Right.
When I go out, my goal is I'm not going to shoot the first thing I see. I want to find a mature animal, right? And so realistically, you have to change your own goals because it's not about necessarily the size of the animal. It's about the experience. And so keeping that in mind, it takes a lot of pressure off of yourself. Kids are kids. And the number one rule is take lots of snacks. I mean, 90% of the time, as long as you can keep your kids fed and they're not hangry and cranky, you'll have a lot more fun. And so that's rule number one. I think that was kind of one of the funny traditions of me and my kids. Every time we would go on a trip, we would hit the gas station and we would stock up on quite a bit of junk food, stuff that they wouldn't normally get at home. We mentioned I'm pretty fit. I try to eat healthy, try to stay healthy. And so we live that lifestyle at home. And so, going on a hunting trip, at least when we first started, was fun because they got to get candy and things that they didn't get to normally eat at home. Right. And so that was part of the experience. For me, I was also really intentional about what hunts I took them on. Am I going to take a 5 and 6 year old on a backcountry elk hunt where we're packing in 6 miles? No. Like, that's just a recipe for disaster. They're not going to have fun. You're going to be miserable. And so really being intentional about what hunts can you take your kids on. Antelope, you mentioned antelope. Antelope is the perfect hunt for kids to start kids on because usually it's a target rich environment, right? Like, you're going to see a lot of antelope. Most of the ranchers and most of the private property, they don't want them on there. And so if you go knock and talk with a kid and you're like, hey, can we go antelope hunting? Chances are you're going to get a yes. Now, it's getting harder. There's no doubt about that. Something like that is a really great opportunity to take kids out. The thing I loved about introducing my kids to antelope hunting also is the time of year, right? You know, it's early fall. It's not miserably cold. You can still go out. There's nice weather. And so that was really the recipe for my success, was picking hunts that my kids could go on and that they were going to be able to enjoy. And you're right. Like, we didn't have to go, I think the farthest. So one of the most memorable hunts, I took my kiddos on a hunt. In fact, that year I only drew a doe tag. I was really disappointed. I didn't get a buck tag, but it's like, what the heck? I'm going to take my kids. And then we were about 3 miles deep and I shot a doe antelope and I threw her in my backpack hole and packed her out. And the kids thought that was a riot. So that's the kind of thing, right? Like, you're in the plains. It's not a tough physically hunt. The weather's nice. You can take snacks. You get to see a lot of animals throughout the day. And so keeping their attention span is that's our biggest battle with kids these days, right? Like, all of the kids, I don't care who you are. My kids didn't get cell phones until they were 12, 13 years old. And we're always battling that technology addiction, the cell phones, the tablets, the video games. And those things can really ruin a kid's hunting experiences and their expectations of hunting. And so a big part of my success too was making sure that my kids weren't on phones. They weren't on tablets. They weren't playing a lot of video games, because it wires their brains to have this instant gratification. And if you've got a kid that's playing video games and on their phone all day and you take them out hunting, they're going to be bored out of their mind and they're going to hate it. Right. And so they're not going to enjoy that experience because their brain is wired to that constant feedback and information that's getting fed to them through their electronic devices, right? And so when you remove that electronic device, the games, all that stuff from the equation, your kids are going to be way more engaged into the outdoors and the outdoor lifestyle. So that's a big part of that too, and being successful at taking your kids outdoors, because again, if they're gaming, and there's nothing necessarily against that, but if you expect your kids to go out and hunt and have fun and they're playing video games most nights, it's not going to go well. They're going to be bored. Dad, this sucks, and kids are going to complain anyway, right? But that was a big part of my success, right? Is just getting kids, being intentional about the hunts that I wanted to plan and take them on from an early age. And now I got to say, it's even harder for me now as they grow and they get older because, you get them into sports. My son, I love him to death. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's also a phenomenal student. And I love that about him. But like, when I was 16, if my dad would have been like, hey, you want to go skip school and go hunting? I cannot lie to you. If I told my son tomorrow, like he wants to go bear hunting, and I'm like, hey, you're going to have to take some time off from school if we go bear hunting. And he's like, oh, well, maybe I will wait. Like legitimately. Wow. And I love the kid. I love how studious he is. But, he's dedicated to school and sports. And so our opportunities to go hunting as much as I would like to right now are just limited because of that. But it's still there, and he still loves to do it. My daughter, on the other hand, she's a girl. When she was little, she loved it. She loved to go. She was like really into the processing and like the breakdown of the animal and the anatomy. Like she was fascinated by it. And obviously, as she grew older, she's kind of grown out of that. And she's like, nah, that's gross. You go do your thing, Dad.
Right, yeah.
Which is kind of a bummer. I'm like, all right, but whatever. But, I think realistically at the end, the thing is she's around it. She's exposed to it. And my hope is that someday she'll marry a guy that's into hunting and she'll appreciate it and she'll understand it. And that'll be a part of their lifestyle because it's been a part of our lifestyle. But I think, again, to kind of answer your question, it's being intentional, right? Being smart about it. I watched a video the other day on YouTube of a guy that took his kid on a bow hunt. And literally, it was amazing. And I was like, dude, that dude's doing it right. Like he took him out on this bow hunt and he ended up, I don't want to get it confused. I think he shot just a bomber of a muley buck, or maybe it was an elk. I can't remember. It was one or the other. But I was like, man, that's next level, right? Like this dude's like literally he packed in his camp and a camp for his kid. And, they didn't go deep. They were probably a couple miles in. And I think it was an elk hunt. It was an elk hunt. He shot an elk. And his kid was there for the whole thing. And like, man, that was just incredible. Part of that is you just got to do it.
Right.
You just got to get him out there. Yeah. You're going to learn some lessons. Funny story. The first time I took my son out antelope hunting with me, he wasn't old enough to hunt at that time, but he was probably 5 or 6 years old. And we found a giant antelope, like just a bomber. And this buck was bedded out in the middle of nothing. We'd crawled up on this bald knob. And eastern Montana, you can see for 1,000 miles.
Right.
We'd crawled up on this knob and we had glassed him up. He was bedded out in this kind of a stubble field. And he was probably like 1,000 yards out. And my son and I were sitting there and glassing, and he was facing away from us. And I'm like, all right, the only way we're going to get this antelope killed is if I'm just going to have to crawl on my butt down this hill right straight at him and just keep wiggling across the ground. And as long as he's facing away from me, I should be good to go, kind of a thing. And just go really slow. And I told my son, I said, I want you to sit here, set up the spotting scope for him, set up the binoculars so he could watch the whole thing, right? I'm like, here's the deal, buddy. Dad's going to sneak down. You're going to be able to see me the whole time. I'm literally going to sneak down the hill right in front of us on my butt. There was a pivot line that kind of made like almost a ditch. And I'm like, I'm going to get down in that pivot line down there. And my goal is to get to that pivot line. That should put me within like 300 yards of this antelope. And you're going to be able to watch the whole thing. So I said, just sit here, hang tight, and we'll just see how it plays out. And I said, if something happens and he runs off, I'll just walk back up here. No big deal. Okay, Dad. He was super excited.
Yeah.
And so I did my thing. I crawled down the hill and got to like, oh man, I was like within 50 yards of that pivot line. I was like 350, something like that. I had just pulled out my earplugs in my pocket. At the time I was shooting a 300 rum and it was loud. It was braked. And so I'm like, throw my earplugs in and I'm like, I got the last 50 yards to get to that pivot line. And I'm sneaking along the ground, just shuffling on my butt, sneaking towards him. And all of a sudden the antelope buck, he like jumps up and he turns and does an about face and he's staring like right at me. And I'm like, what is going on? Like the wind's in my face. Like, why is he looking at me? And I thought to myself, oh, I wonder if my son like stood up on the skyline and like he skylined himself. But I'm like, even then, like the antelope was facing away.
Right.
Like even if he stood up, he wouldn't have seen him. And so I kind of like look around and I can see my son sitting up there on the hill still. And he's not skylining. And I'm like, what got this antelope's attention? And I'm like, whatever it is, he's about to blow. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to make it to the pivot line. I ranged him, dialed it, boom, pwop, dropped him in his tracks, And I pull out my earplugs and I can hear my son crying. He's like literally like sobbing, like bawling. And I'm like, run up the hill. I'm like, sprint up the hill. And I'm like, buddy, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong? He's like, I lost you, Dad. Like, I thought I lost you. Like, I had crossed kind of like right at the bottom, and, he was watching the antelope, and I just slipped out of his sight. I wasn't out of his sight, but, for a 5-year-old, I was 500 yards away. He just legitimately, like, thought he lost his dad. And he was, and so that's what it had caught the antelope's attention. He started crying. I felt horrible. I'm giving him a hug, and I'm like, buddy, it's okay. I'm right here. And I'm like, did you see it? He's like, yeah, you got him, Dad. He's like crying. So it worked out. So it was just a fun memory, Things like that are going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
Like your kids are going to cry. They're going to get upset. Again, take lots of snacks, take fun food. But that was just a really
Make sure
fun
they
memory
can see
for
you
us. The whole way, If I had to do it all over again, I wished I would have taken him with me on the stock. Like, just come along, like crawl with me. Like if we blow it, we blow it. It was a huge antelope, like almost a buck antelope that I ended up killing that year. That was the only reason I didn't. And it was the first time that I'd ever taken him. And so I was kind of a little gun shy. Like, what's going to happen? Is he going to scare something off? Is he going to be too loud? We have those fears as a parent. And they are. Kids are going to be kids. They're going to be noisy. I think you just have to be intentional and prepare for that and just be like, oh, well, what happens, happens. Like, let's go and have an adventure.
So did you find that you, altered your approach to hunting or your plans for your season? Did you say, I'm going to have these 5 hunts that I'm going to go super hard and go by myself, and these 4 or 5 hunts that I'm going to hunt with my kids? Or how did you balance that with your kid trying to get them involved?
At the beginning when they were too young to hunt themselves, I'll speak specifically obviously for my son because my daughter, she went along, but she's never hunted for herself. In those days, not really. It was just like, okay, I would try to get an antelope tag. I tried to get a rifle antelope tag because trying to kill an antelope with a bow is challenging enough, and taking a kid, that would be really hard. And so being intentional, like taking a kid bow hunting for antelope, probably not the best idea because it's going to be tough. Like, sure, you might get some good opportunities, but it's going to make it harder. So try to just, again, narrowing down the odds to be successful and have fun. So when they were little and not of hunting age, not so much. I would just try to get a couple of good antelope tags. As far as deer hunting, at first, yes, I did. I had a couple of private ranches that I could hunt on, and so we would go and hunt those places. And there's no pressure. There wasn't other hunters out there, and so that was just a good opportunity for us to go out and just have our own adventure. It's different on public land. It's a totally different ballgame. Once my son became of hunting age, and you mentioned earlier the apprentice program, I think when he's 10 years old, we went out and got his first mule deer. The beauty about Montana is the rifle season of antelope overlaps. It can overlap the youth deer hunt.
Right.
And so his very first year, it was a combo thing. So I had an antelope tag and he had a deer tag, and it's like, all right, let's go try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Some of the areas that I've hunted on public land have both mule deer and antelope. We got really lucky. We found the buck that he ended up killing his very first year on his youth hunt. We found the day before while I was antelope hunting. Jumped him up out of his bed and watched him run down into a coulee. And was like, all right, well, we're coming back here tomorrow and hopefully we can turn up that deer.
Yep.
It was a great plan, and I thought, man, this is going to be awesome. Like, we watched that buck bed down right before dark, and I'm like, we'll be right back here in the morning. We killed him, but dude, he was 2 miles from where we left him that night.
Wow.
Like, that's how much the landscape had changed. There was hunters everywhere, but we got fortunate enough that we found him and we got it done still. So
good.
Nowadays, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, if his schedule will allow it and sports will allow it and we've got time, then yeah, we'll go plan a mule deer hunt.
Find that hunting is compromise, and to be successful and kill great big bulls, you have to have a little bit of selfishness in, and you have to take it and do that. But did you find that, like, when you were with kids, like me personally, I haven't shot a buck deer in, I don't know how long, 10, 15 years, because I'm looking for the wall hanger, the taxidermy bill. And if I don't get that, I'll go shoot a doe the last 4 hours of the season and put some meat in the freezer. That's just kind of what I do. I try and fill a whitetail B tag, early season archery, get some meat in the freezer, and then go chase elk. And then if I have time, I'll go hunt deer in the rut. And then if it's not a big one, I'll shoot a doe on the last day of the season. But I've thought about that, and I'm just like, well, I could go out, and I feel like, our deer populations kind of suffer right now, but I feel like I could go out and shoot a forked horn or 3x3 or whatever with my boys without a ton of effort. I just haven't necessarily been willing to shoot that small buck.
And it's
because I haven't done it since I was 14 years old, right?
It's really tough.
So
that's something that I battle with internally because, I'm the same way. I shot a decent buck 2 years ago. I did not shoot a mule deer buck last year. Side note, dude, I hunted my butt off last year. I put close to 2,000, 3,000 miles on my truck, 20 some days in the field, and I saw 0 mature deer. Not a single mature 4-point buck last year on public land. I did see a handful of young bucks, the 2 points, the 3 points, that stuff. I'm conflicted. The second year that I took my son out hunting, that video is actually up on my YouTube channel, and it's worth checking out. It's a father-son hunt. I killed a really nice buck. I actually killed the buck that I was hoping he would kill. Found him during archery season, found this buck, real nice 4-point, and we went back for the youth hunt. Turned that buck up on the first morning of the youth hunt, and he ghosted us for 2 days. Found him literally at first light, hadn't seen that buck in 2 months. The luck of turning him up in that country that morning was pure luck. We hunted him all day, couldn't find him. Hunted him all the next day, couldn't find him. The youth hunt's only 2 days.
Right.
And the third day was the open for the general hunt. And so on the evening of the youth hunt, on the second day, we were in the area looking for him. And, I wanted that buck for my son. Like, I wanted my son to kill that big mature 4-point. And that was the goal that we had kind of going into it. But that was my expectation.
Right.
And it was the last hour of light. We're in the area. We're looking for him still. And I turned up young, probably 2.5, 3.5-year-old mule deer buck. I pulled my son over. He was kind of glassing in one direction. I was glassing in the other. And I said, come look at this buck. He looks at him. And I said, you want to shoot that buck? And his eyes lit up. And he's like, yeah, Dad, I want to shoot that buck. That buck was way smaller, but he wanted it, and that's what it was about in that moment. It was like, yeah, I want to shoot that buck, Dad. And that's the way it should be, right? It shouldn't be my expectation of wanting him to kill that big buck. Like, it would have been really cool if he'd have killed that big buck.
Yeah.
But, that's the way it played out. And we got really lucky, and I ended up killing that buck the next day on the open. Okay. We turned him up back in the same drainage that we found him the first morning. But the point being is that you got to take your kids out there. And you can't hold yourself back, because I get stuck in this rut where I'm like, I don't want to kill an immature deer, because that might be a deer that some other kid might be really excited to take next year. The reality is your kids are going to get excited about it if you're excited about it. And that's what you have to make it about. The adventure, the excitement, and it doesn't matter, again, I said this at the beginning, it doesn't matter about the size of the rack on the wall. Like, it's about the adventure. It's about the experience. And part of that experience is part of your podcast, like bringing food to the table, man.
Yeah.
Right? And being able to provide. My son got really fortunate and took his first bull 2 years ago, bull elk. We got really lucky. That was a private land hunt, got invited to go out to a place with another friend of mine, took his first elk. But the moral of this story is that even to this day, we're still eating elk, and I'll be like, oh, hey, this is Kyler's elk that we're cooking up. And the sense of pride, like, you can see it, that he has, that he put that food on the table.
Right.
And that year, dude, he's the only one that got an elk. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have had elk meat in our freezer, right? And so that, again, is part of it, right? And obviously, we're really blessed to have that opportunity, but it's tougher. It's harder. It's a harder game. And just to be honest, like, we've had some bad experiences too, where we've had other not good encounters with other public land hunters, which have been really frustrating.
Yeah.
And that to me that's the sad part of where we're at right now. I think, especially in Montana, as you mentioned, our deer numbers are way down. The elk numbers aren't great. They're not bad, but they're not great. But what we've seen, and I think everybody across the country would agree, is that since COVID, like, the number of hunters that are out in the woods has increased exponentially.
Sure.
And hey, I love the sport of hunting. I love that people are getting out, but that's put a lot of pressure on public land. A couple of years ago, I had an experience with a dude who was taking his young son up hunting. I literally, like, pretty much crawled into my backpack and hiked right into my spot with me. And it left a really bad taste in my mouth because he wasn't teaching his son a good code of ethics of hunting. Sure. And I feel like a lot of people nowadays, because it's become such a cutthroat sport on public land, especially around here where we're at, that people are doing really bad things in terms of just ethically and morally bad things. Like I had a buddy of mine that texted me a picture of him and his son. They were out sitting at daylight in this meadow, and a group of other individuals literally ran right past them to get in front of them to shoot the herd of elk that they were sitting on. You know, it's like that's kind of stuff that our kids are getting exposed to on public land.
Let's spend some time there, because I feel like that is not talked about enough in the hunting space and by guys trying to teach adult onset hunters to go hunt. And guys, that is wrong. That is 100% wrong. I was raised by my dad that we hunt, and we hunted public land. And back in 1996, public land was different, but it was to the point that, and I'll name a spot because you can go there because there will be 80 trucks there, but Goose Creek Trailhead going down kind of south of, in between Bozeman and Livingston there. I hunted that when I was in high school and college. And when we would go hunt that trailhead, now you can go there this hunting season, there'll be 80 trucks there. But in 1996, dude, we would go to that trailhead, and if we weren't the first people at that trailhead, we went to another trailhead, you know. And what the moral of the story my dad taught me, we didn't get out of bed early enough. If you want to be first, you get out of bed earlier. You don't hurry up and pull in the trailhead and be like, oh, that guy hasn't got out of his truck yet. I'm going to hurry and throw my crap on, and I'm going to race him up the hill because I'm in better shape, and I'm going to go take the spot and ruin his hunting experience. And guys, that's not going to kill you animals, you know. And for a long time, that frustrated me so bad because I would be like, all these people are out here and they're all hunting. Guess what? The people that are doing that are crappy hunters. They aren't good, and they aren't going to kill stuff. You know why? Because I've watched it happen, and I've watched them get, you know, upwind from elk, blow out the situation, make crappy shots and miss, that they can't get to the animal after they shoot, whatever the case may be. And because they're being lazy, not putting in the work, and they're trying to screw their neighbor. And sorry, God will not reward that, I don't believe. You know, and now it's like, what did I tell you that I need to do to be successful? Get up early, hike off a trail, go the hard way, and get up early and stay out late. And I didn't say go cut off that guy who got there before you.
The ethics in the hunting community right now sucks. It really does. And I think part of it is, again, it's circumstantial to the environment that we're in right now, because the amount of public land is not growing, it's shrinking. The amount of hunters and the amount of people that are on the landscape is growing. And so there's this competing pressure. And on the flip side of that, as we mentioned and started talking about earlier in the podcast, is the ranchers and the people who own the private property. Those guys can make $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, upwards of $100,000 a year of an additional income if they allow an outfitter to come in, and that outfitter has control over who's hunting on the property. That rancher doesn't have to worry about people leaving gates open and driving off the road, driving when it's muddy. And so those public lands that used to be open in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, they're not open to the public anymore. They're shut down. Funny story, obviously we're in the area of Bozeman. I moved up here from Wyoming. I grew up on a ranch. I know how to talk to ranchers when I go knock on the door, right? I've had many of wonderful encounters with some amazing ranchers and some great people who let me hunt on their property. But after moving to Montana, I made the mistake one time of knocking on a door, and the rancher invited me in, had a great conversation. He says, where are you from? And I said, well, I live in Bozeman. He literally escorted me out of his house and was like, you're not welcome to hunt on my 100%. Property. Because he's had bad experiences from people in this area doing the things that we just talked about.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of them. We're going to beat this horse a little bit because I'm pretty passionate about the hunter's ethics. It's one of the reasons I started taking some friends that hadn't grown up hunting, is because I want to teach them the right way I was taught. I live in Three Forks. But it's occurred, and I don't have number 6 plates on any of my vehicles. I'm sure you saw that, or maybe you didn't notice it when you rolled up, but that is 100% intentional, you know?
And it's sad that it's come to that.
Yes,
it really is.
We need it. Bozeman, we need to do better. We need to change and have good rancher relations, good landowner relations. But also some of this, And it's tough because, like you mentioned, we are losing public lands. There is stuff all the time of people wanting to sell public lands. And it is nice that we do have all these hunters that now care,
Yeah.
that want to conserve that public land, because I don't feel like in the backpacking world, the Bozeman, Montana, or the mountain biking world, or any of these other activities out there, that they're putting forth the effort to conserve public lands and save public lands. But I also feel like us hunters have become terribly entitled and have our nose through the roof because we think we're public land hunters. And, nothing against public land. And I understand when you mention you're a public land hunter, you are talking about the difficulty and the challenges you hunt. I feel like there are people that turn up their nose to people that hunt private land. And it's like, man, just because somebody happens to have a better connection or happens to have the means to afford private land or whatever the case, I don't hold that against them. I've considered, it's like, man, by the time I go to eastern Montana with my boys and take and spend all the money in gas and the whole weekend and hotel rooms and food and everything else, it's like, maybe I do go see one of my buddies from high school that lives on the Gallatin River outside of Gateway and has his land and land trust, and I pay $300 to go shoot a whitetail doe. I'm still probably money ahead, and I'll probably find success with my kids, But I'm kind of rabbit trailing. But guys, we need to take and be respectful, number one, of the landowners. If there are block management areas, if there are people that are out there that do allow us to hunt, if there are ranchers that have public easements that they have to have, or that they don't own, we need to take and not give them any reason to take and try and shut those down. Yeah. We should be the guy that's taken, and that's one of the things I learned from my dad. We go out and hunt, and we show up a day early, and we visit with ranchers and visit with old friends. Every time around Easter, we take and pass the hat around, and we go to Bob's Valley Market in Helena and buy hams, because my dad won't buy guys alcohol, which is fine. Hams are better anyways, but even if the rancher wants a good bottle of bourbon or a 18 pack of beer or whatever the case, or better yet, when I was younger, we used to go out and we would go to brandings. We would go help fix fence, We would go buck hay bales and stuff like that. And a lot of that has gone away. Even if we hunt public land, we need to have that mindset with each other that, guys, we're on the same team. And an elk or a deer is not worth getting accidentally shot, getting in a fist fight over, teaching your kids terrible moral habits to take in, and then polluting my kids with them thinking that it's all right because you were a jerk, stepped in front of them when they're trying to shoot their first deer.
No, you're absolutely right. We need to hold a higher standard. You see a lot of influencers, digital content creators, guys that are publishing a lot of their content on Instagram, YouTube, other platforms, and they talk about, hey, it's public land. You're absolutely right. We're all public land owners, right? We all pay taxes. We all own that property. But like you said, even though I grew up hunting on private land exclusively, like I had the dream place to hunt on growing up, right? Even without growing up and hunting and starting my hunting career on public land, I had the decency and the ethics to do the exact same thing. Like if I showed up to a trailhead and somebody else was there, I'm like, all right, they beat me. Plan A is out, plan B's next, right?
Yeah.
And I always have a plan B and a plan C, not always a plan D. And honestly, some of the most successful hunts that I have had have been plan D, where I'm like, I went to plan A, somebody was there. I went to plan B, somebody was there. I went to plan C, somebody was there. And it's now 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm still driving around trying to find a place to go hunt. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll park here and go for a walk. And then I kill, the biggest elk I've ever killed.
Right.
Find a great animal. That's the glory of God right there, right? Like,
100%.
That's Murphy's Law. It's you do good, you get good expectation.
Yeah.
But dude, that's why I said a lot of times right now, just like you mentioned, you'll go to a trailhead and there's 80 trucks there. Now, sure, there's a lot of public land in some areas. But here's an example. A buddy of mine parked at a trailhead, and at that specific trailer, we were there at 4 o'clock in the morning. At that time of the season, daylight wasn't until about 7 or 8. We were 3 hours early because we had a good hour and a half to 2 hour hike ahead of us to get into where I wanted to go. We had hunted there the day before. We were in elk. We knew where the elk were at. We knew what the wind was doing. But anyway, we get to the trailhead and another truck showed up just as we were walking away from the truck. And at that particular trailhead, it's interesting because there's actually 4 different trails. So there's kind of a trail that goes along the base of the mountain, and you can go either way, right or left. And then on that trail, it branches off and goes up into different canyons. So there's legitimately 4 established trails that you can take, but it's public land, right? Like there's 4 million acres. You can go a lot of different places. So I wasn't really worried that another truck pulled up. We get out, it's in the dark, we're hiking up. We take one of those main branches of the trail, and we get, a quarter mile from the truck, and I look back and there's headlamps coming up the same trail that we're on. And I'm like, okay, no big deal. We're going to cut off the trail anyway up here a quarter mile and go up this ridge, and no big deal. So we cut off the trail, we get on the ridge, and we're hiking up a mountain. And so we stop, take a break, whatever. And I turn around and the headlamps are following us up the ridge. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, we're the only 2 people out here. There's 4 separate trailheads, and there's unlimited amounts of ridges. I mean, there's canyon every quarter mile along the mountain. There's a different canyon. And I'm like, these people are coming up the same ridge? Like, what is happening? I told my buddy, I said, you go ahead of me. I'm going to go have some words because this is ridiculous. And I got to be honest, I was hot. I was mad. I'm like, what is this dude doing? Like, they can see our headlamps. They know where we're going. Yeah. And at that point, we were committed to going into one canyon. And if you hunt that country at all, you know what the wind do. There's only one direction you can go where you're not going to blow things up, where you can get into game. And so I wait. I just stop and I wait. And eventually the guy catches up to me. And like I said, I was going to light this dude up. I was prepared to be like, bro, what in the world? Like, literally, do you want to crawl in my backpacks and I'll carry you up to my spot? Like, what's the deal? And as he gets up to me, he's got his, 10-year-old son with him. And I'm like, it just deflated me. I was like, literally, I was like, bro, what's going on? What's your plan here this morning? Like, where are you going? And he's like, oh, well, you guys got here and, we're going to go hunt up in this canyon. I'm like, well, where did you think we were going? Like, there's a lot of country out here, but this is a pretty small canyon. Clearly, we're going into that canyon. What's your plan? I'm like, really, there isn't, you can go that way with the wind, but this is where we're going. And he's like, oh, well, we were in here like a couple of weeks ago and there was elk in here. And I'm like, okay, so there's elk all over the mountain. There's other elk up here. We beat you to this spot. Dude, and he's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we'll go somewhere else. Dude, he followed us right up the mountain, snuck right down in below us and started elk calling. And I will say, I don't know if this dude will ever listen to this, he was one hell of an elk caller. And he actually called in a bull. And unbeknownst to him, my buddy and I snuck down between him and the elk, and I almost killed that bull. But it's like, dude, what are you doing? What are you you're teaching your son that's okay. And over the course of the last 4 years, I've had a handful of those experiences. And that's what's really frustrating is hopefully somebody will hear this and just recognize, look, man, if you got your heart set on going to a spot and somebody beats you there, you just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right? You go to plan B, you go to plan C, and you try something else.
If you don't know, or if you don't have that experience, or you're lost, I would have a much better response to that guy who said, man, I've only hunted here once in my life. I've only been to this canyon. I don't know what anything else looks like. I don't hunt a lot. I don't really know what I'm doing. I mean, if a guy tells me that, I'm probably saying, okay, dude, next time, can you talk to me at the trailhead before we hike? And I might say, okay, you go up this canyon. And I guess that's the other thing too, is, I do realize it's not 1996 anymore. It is really hard to find an empty trailhead, but go and talk to, especially if they beat you. But even, it's like, go talk to them and then respect their plan. And there's been times where I've been beat and it's like, I get there the next morning at when I was in college, dude, I would get beat. I'd hunt up the canyon and stuff like that. And that was back in the glory days in the 90s. And I'd get beat somewhere and I would get there at 1 o'clock in the morning because I was not getting beat the next day, And if that's what you got to do, I would much rather you teach your kids that you got to work for it and do that than teach your kids that, we're just going to take and and, recognize Dan's pickup and see his YouTube video, and this guy knows how to kill elk, so we're going to follow him or something,
Well, and a big part of it too, and the last thing I think we should really talk about is the comfort zone, right? A big part of taking kids hunting is teaching them how to successfully navigate the world outside of their comfort zone. Because hunting is and can be uncomfortable, right? Yep. We've all been there where you're stuck in a storm and the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour and it's 30 below zero, it's cold, it's miserable, and you're like, why am I out here? What am I doing this for? If we're going to raise the next generation right, we have to expose our kids to things that are uncomfortable. Our country's in a comfort crisis. They have everything at their fingertips. You can order things through AI, and in some cities, not necessarily in remote Montana yet, you can get Amazon deliveries by a drone, and you can have comfort at your doorstep within a day. And so I think as hunters right now, we need to be really intentional about doing things with our kids that make them uncomfortable. Hunting's a great thing that can make our kids uncomfortable. A really quick, perfect example and a story of that is a hunt that I took my son on. It was the hunt where we already talked about a little bit, where he took kind of a smaller 4x4 and I took a nice 4x4. That video is on my YouTube channel. We had to pack my buck out of a canyon, out of a hole. He was 2 miles from the truck, and it was uphill the whole way. I don't want to say, let me rephrase that. It was uphill like 1.8 miles, and half mile to the truck was across a flat. But it was hard. My son, bless his heart, he'd gotten kind of a bigger backpack that year for Christmas, I think. And we killed that buck, and he was really excited to pack some of the meat. I was like, Dad, I'm loading my pack and throwing, and he's like, Dad, let me take some of that meat. Let me take some of that meat. And I'm like, I think you got enough, buddy. Like, I think you're going to be okay there. And so we get like halfway through, and he's kind of realizing, man, this is hard work. Like, this is really hard work. And we were probably 3/4 of the way up and on the way out, and he just broke down and was just like sobbing, and he's like, I can't go anymore, Dad. It's too hard. I'm gonna die, just literally like just sobbing. And he'll be really mad at me telling this story, but we get up to the top, and I'm like, just keep encouraging him, like, all right, let's stop, let's take a break, let's eat some snacks. Unfortunately, we didn't have the goodies with us. They were back at the truck, but I was like, we got good snacks at the truck. Just keep hammering, buddy. Like, you just got to keep going, one foot after the other. We will make it, I promise. Yeah. We'll stop and take breaks. And we did. We stopped and took a bunch of breaks, and we finally get back to the truck and broke out the candy. And I think I had Skittles and Sour Patch Kids or something like that. And the tears turned into smiles. And I was like, look, you made it, didn't you? You didn't die. You're okay. Right, yeah. And so we have to force the kids to do hard things. That's such a big part of it, I think. And when they do hard things, then the reward and the enjoyment is so much more too.
Yeah. No, I think that's killer for sure. I appreciate this, Dan. This is awesome. We've kind of run a little bit long. We definitely need to do this again because I have so much more questions.
Yeah, let's do it again, man.